Hey, so this demo is going to be about taking a shot that is really simplistic, maybe one that would just be a talking head or would have some movement, but this movement's very simplistic. So let's say something that could be done with rotations or the character stays in the same angle the whole time, and seeing if there's a way that we can simplify the production of that shot so that you still have some nice animation to it, or a little bit more than a completely still frame, but also keeping it simple so that you're managing your time wisely. Because you're going to have some shots that we'll call like the B shots or the simple shots, the low money shots, where we're not really meant to spend tons and tons of time on them. We may just not have that time to spare. And then you'll have what we'll call our money shots or A shots, where we either want or need, or it's important for that shot to have really nice animation. Maybe what the character's doing is complicated. Maybe it's an exciting shot, and we really want to evoke emotion in the audience. So in order to get those shots, the ones that are more powerful, in order to get those to look as nice as possible, we may have to sacrifice time for our other shots, especially if it's a low income project, so we don't have a lot of budget to work with, or we just don't have a lot of time. So if you're working on your own school project, for example, there's only going to be so many hours that you can dedicate to it, just realistically. Even if you didn't have other classes, even if you didn't have another job, even if you didn't have other life obligations, there's only so many hours in the day. And it's easy to want to make every single shot look amazing and beautiful and have wonderful flowing animation. And if you can do that, that's great. But it may not be realistic to do that. So in cases like that, you may have some shots where you're inevitably stuck with basically a talking head shot. So what we're going to focus on here is puppeting, but puppeting to a shot. So not necessarily creating one puppet that's going to be used over and over and over again. That'll be a separate lecture. But this one's just if you don't want to have the entire film done as puppets and you plan on having some of it frame by framed, but then you have some shots that are meant to be a little bit cheaper or easier, here's something that's an option that you can do to have a little bit of animation in your less important shots. So now, if this was a really rough storyboard, then I would recommend refine the character first and then start turning into a puppet. But this particular storyboard has a pretty refined look for him. And I'm ignoring the background in terms of I'm not going to do anything with it right now. That's being done by somebody else. So, or would be done in a separate program maybe. I'm assuming that the background is handled. I'm only focusing on the character for the sake of this demo. So, what I'm going to want to do when you're creating a puppet is you want to break down the puppet into layers. Every piece that is going to animate separately needs to be on its own layer. So for example, I would not put the eyebrows and the eyes on the same layer. If you want to have the eyebrows raise a little bit separately from the eyes doing anything, then it would be easier if the eyebrows were each on their own layer. Same thing with the eyes. You could have each eye on its own layer if you want the character to be able to blink, let's say one eye first, then the other, say if the character's really tired, or you want them to wink, or you want one eye to be half open, the other eye fully open, and then have it switch so that they're both open at the same amount of open at the same time. So you could do that. I sometimes recommend that. If you were going to make this into a puppet that was going to be used over and over again, then I would absolutely recommend that, because even if you don't plan on having, let's say, the eyes do something different right now, you would be surprised how much that can change later. I've absolutely had projects where I had a client who did not intend for in all the storyboards and the whole thing, the eyes stayed the same throughout, and after animating it, and looking over at it, and the puppet was finished, and a lot of the animation was finished. There were a couple spots where he was like, "Oh, maybe the eye could be open a little more in here than the other, here and over here on this other shot." And had the eyes not been separated, that would have been a big problem, because in a puppet we would have basically either had to create alternate parts for that set of eyes, so that one eye was open more than the other, but then if you want to make adjustments, or you're just kind of stuck doing that. It's easier to make changes if they're separate and to animate them separately. So I would recommend making these two separate. The nose probably could just stay on the head layer unless we were going to do 2.5D, or if you wanted to adjust the nose one way or the other, or up or down to make it look like the character has subtle 3D motion. I'm probably not going to do that here because we're just focusing on a character being really simple, and he probably isn't going to need to move around that much. It's basically a talking head shot. So I'll keep the nose with the head. The ears I would put on their own layer if they moved independently, so like dog ears, cat ears, fox ears, big droopy ears, anything that's going to have any kind of overlapping action, secondary motion, or personality. This character does not have wiggling ears, so I'm just going to dock the ears as part of the head and keep them together. The neck I would separate from the head. The bangs I would separate from the head if they were going to move. I'm not entirely sure that the bangs moving would work here if the character's just moving subtly. I'll separate them probably, but I may not use them. I may just attach them to the head separately, have them follow the head, and then maybe move them if it would be helpful. But I'm doubting that his hair is really going to need to move here because it's short, and he's not going to move that much. The shoulders might want to move. Shoulders and arms might need to move separately from the body. Even if I'm not really intending for the arms to do anything, it might look weird if they are completely stiff and his body moves. So just for safety, I might, and just have the option to be able to move the body a little more, I'll probably have the arms separate from the body separate from the head. The neck is in a cowl covered. I will probably have the neck... Would I want it to be separate? I might make it separate, and then maybe attach part of the cowl to the neck. We'll see. Sometimes this can be a bit touch and go. So if you are going to create a puppet, you could start off by roughing out the puppet. This is a pretty complete looking character, so I'm going to ink it straight up on top of this this fellow. But if I was going to do something elaborate, where the character's going to be turning his head around and I might need alternate parts, then sometimes I will rough animate the character first, very, very roughly, so that I know everything I want that character to do. Then, during the inking stage, I will ink on top of those roughs, but try to only ink a few of the positions and see if moving the puppet parts through the in-betweens would be enough. I'm not going to do that here. We're just going to make it pretty simple. I'm just going to trace the parts here and then just try to move what we have. No alternate, or few alternate puppet parts. We would need alternate mouths and alternate eyes and probably alternate brows, but nothing really time-taxing for this simple shot. So it would help if you have access to your character's colors. So I do have access to his colors. I have a palette that's already made, and we have another lecture that is just about creating your own palettes and exporting them out. So I'm not going to go into that in here, but I'm going to go to plus. Oh, so not plus. I'm going to go to, where is it? That's right mouse click. So you have import, link to external. So the difference is, import would mean that you're bringing the palette into this Harmony file, so that if the original palette that I'm linking goes away, I don't lose it. But at the same time, if I needed to change the palette, I would need to change the palette and then replace it in all relevant files. So if I wanted to make one palette that all the Harmony files connect to, then we may want to link to external, and that way if we make any changes to that palette, we change that one palette and then all the shots are connected to it. But you just have to be really careful, because in your file system, if that palette gets moved, then all your files are going to disconnect from it and you're going to run into trouble. So import will bring it into your Harmony file, but if you go and change it, it won't automatically change your main palette, your master palette. It won't affect in here. You would just have to copy and paste that updated palette into your Harmony file. And then it would update. So I'm going to link to external, and we're going to want scene palette list. I'm going to hit browse, and now I just have to locate. Actually, before I do that, I've been saving this onto my desktop. Let me move it into its proper location if I'm going to do something like that. So I'm just going to save and close this real quick. And I'm going to go into the actual project file, project animation. Some of these, their names they were done for demos, and I don't have the shot list done for those particular scenes yet. But these are the ones that were done with the shot list, or updated the names with the shot list. Once the shot list is done for the other scenes, I would rename these. Well, not master palette, I'd leave that. But that's the master palette that has Cain's and Larkspur's, the main two characters as palettes. The other characters are not done yet. But I'm going to want to take the shot that I'm working on, which is SC01 019. Whoops. And it jumped like that because I had it saved onto the desktop. So there's 019. There we go. So now when I connect it to the master palette, it's in the same folder that master palette's in. And that way, if I take this animation folder and I move it somewhere, I don't have to worry about these two disconnecting. So I'm going to reopen. There we go. Now I'm going to go in and scene palettes. If your palettes are ever not showing up, just click somewhere in here in the timeline and it should show up. Right mouse click, link to external, scene palette list. Saga project episodes 1, production, animation, master palette, Cain. I can import Larkspur's too, but she's not in this shot, so there's no real reason to do it. There we go. So there's Cain's, and here's the updated, or his palette. And I would use these palettes, or these colors, to work with. So I'm going to go with lines, and I just like to start with the head. It doesn't mean that you have to. Okay, so I'm just zooming in by hitting the 2 key on the keyboard. And I usually like to do my puppet parts with either the pencil or the line tool. But how you choose to ink is up to you. So I do have a demo that talks about inking in general, and the same techniques that we would use for inking, we would use for creating the inks for the puppet. But I'll go over them real quick. So you have the pencil. An advantage of the pencil is that you can retroactively change your thickness. So I really like that ability. You can also use the, I think it's the contour editor. Yeah, you can use the contour editor to smooth it out and make slight adjustments to it. So that's one nice advantage of the pencil tool. One thing to watch out for, though, with the pencil tool is you have what looks like a completed shape, and I go to fill it, and it's not filling. And that's because if I hit the K key, I can see the strokes, and they're not actually touching. They're very close, but they're not touching. We could do an auto fill gap, and it might work, but you sometimes will get reactions that you weren't expecting. There's other ways to fill the gaps as well. If you use the brush, you will not have the fill gap issue as much, but you cannot change the thickness of the brush retroactively, I don't believe. Yeah, you can't change it. So, whatever thickness you have committed to it. You also can't adjust the center line as easily, but I think you can adjust it somewhat. Let me see. I think there's a center line editor now. Yeah. Yeah, so you can. You can adjust the center line now. That's a newer feature. So if that's the only reason why you'd want to go with the pencil tool rather than the line, then that might be a reason to stick with the brush. But still, you won't be able to change the thickness of it afterwards. But again, that may not be something you care too much about. That may not be a big deal. And you also might not be going with the smooth vector lines that I'm trying to go with. You can also go with, you know, stylistic outlines if you want to. I don't tend to like to work that way, but that's just a personal thing. That's not a do this or don't do this. Pencil, I think you do not have. Yeah, you have some options. So you have the charcoal, but I don't believe you have as many. Yeah, you don't have as many. Another option is the line tool. So the way the line tool works is you draw a straight. Whoa, that's definitely not what we want. Let's go back with pencil. So this one's a little bit better if you want to have uniform lines, or if you want very, very, very precise lines. Now that might sound like, well, why would I want to do that? My character has curves. You can left mouse down and drag, and then hold down Command, and you can adjust. It's kind of like working with only Bezier. Oh, I'm sorry, only quadratics. So you're a little bit limited to how much of a curve it's capable of. We'll just be a little careful. That looks a little pointy. But the nice part about working this way is that I find it way easier to make changes if you find that you've made a mistake or there's something you don't like. It's a lot easier to work with. Now, it can still be a little hard to color because even though you have your points really close to each other, they might not still be considered connected. Are they? Oh, well, this one is. So I've been, they're connecting properly. That's good. But sometimes they don't. Some ways that you can ensure that it will connect properly is by turning on, well, you have the gap, auto gap close. That's helpful. There's also snap to contour. Snap to contour will also make it more likely that it'll connect, but sometimes that can cause your lines to jolt around, although it doesn't seem to be doing that to me right now. But it can make your lines a little hard to control, so what I'll do is kind of toggle this off and on. Oops, I'm going up the blood trail and not up the side of his face. There's the side of his face. Now, I don't have to connect these the whole time. I want them to connect eventually, but if it's hard to kind of draw this way, because that's not naturally how I draw, I tend to draw up to down for the side of his face here. If that gives me trouble, I could... His chin probably looks okay here. I can go up here where I normally start drawing the line. Now, I'm going to start drawing into his head, under his hair. I would not draw the bangs on the same level as his head if the bangs are going to have any chance of moving. And I don't think his bangs are going to move, but I at least want to have that option if I do decide to have it move. So I'm not going to draw his bangs. I'm going to draw his skull as if he had shaved or had hair that was very tight to his head. Now, I don't have to worry too much about what his head looks like under here. It could look wonky wherever it's covered by the hair, because most likely it will not be seen. There we go. There you go. And they don't have to connect at the edges. They can connect anywhere inside. And you can use the contour editor. I don't like how pointy that spot was in his ear. There we go. Now, if you do want to have non-uniform lines, but you want to use this technique, you can by making a selection, and you should be able to go in here and grab like tapered thickness stencil. Any of the stencils will let you, yeah, you see, it does have its problems though. Yeah, you can have automatic stenciling. I do not like this at all, so let's do uniform thickness. You can also control it yourself by, let me undo. You go back to normal. But you can also control it by using I think it's called the pencil editor. And I believe you can change your thickness that way. Let's see. Yeah. So if you want to adjust, make this thinner. There we go. So if you do have a pointy spot that sticks out like that too much, I believe you can pull it in that way. So you can make little changes like that. I would say if you were doing a lot of frame by frame animation, I think the time it would take to make that look good for every single frame might be more trouble than it's worth. But if you are just tapering a few spots, then that may not be too bad. Some of the challenges of your project is going to be, how do we get it to look good enough? You may have your ideal, so this is what I would love for it to look like, but you also need to make sure that the project gets finished, which can really be easier said than done. Okay, let's go back to the line tool. Let me adjust that, because this part I want to stand out past the, that's going to show up past the bangs. Okay, so this part looks really lumpy and weird. Not that we would really see it, but look at that. Okay. And then so there is a potential issue here. If his head and his neck are two separate layers, and I go to move it, say his head would probably move at his jawline. Let me turn animate off because I'm not actually animating it. He is going to have an issue with his head cutting into his neck or coming out from his neck. So that is something that we're going to need to address most likely at some point. I'm going to undo. Oops, redo. That is something that will probably need to be addressed at some point. I am not going to worry about that yet. I want this image to look complete, but I'm going to keep an eye on it because there's some things that we can do to avoid that problem, but it might get a little bit technical. And his head looks a little bit narrower in the back. I don't like that. Okay, undo. Let me turn off contours. It's not making it hard to move it around. Let me bring this tighter. Okay. Then for the nose, his head is, let's see, do I like the way his nose looks? I'm gonna change the angle of his nose a little bit. Okay. There we go. And now for his head, his hairline, I would include his hairline in this. Actually, let me turn on auto gap fill. And I want to make sure that it's above his bangs, but not too high. And it's a little bit shaky. So I'm going to turn centerline smoothing. Let's try 20. There we go. There we go. So there is his head, independent of his bangs, his eyes, his brows, and his mouth. And this is something that's probably going to need to be dealt with, the back of his head compared to his neck. But I'm going to build the other parts first, roughly, and then probably deal with that. Oh, and the blood. Should the blood be... I don't think it's going to be dripping. I could maybe make it part of his head. I'll put it on its own layer and just probably tag it onto the head. Drawing. Let's do his neck. Add and close. His neck's going to be below his head. And so he's got the cowl. Now, if I were to draw his neck and his neck moved independently of the cowl, that's going to be a little weird because the cowl overlaps the neck and is made of a softer material that's meant to move with the neck. So it would probably make more sense to have the neck and the cowl be together. Now, again, I'm going to probably need to make a change to this once I start testing this out because we do have this connection issue with the with the back of the head. But I'm going to draw the neck. His neck might need to be thicker than that. I don't even know if you're going to even see the front of his neck. I don't think his head's going to lift high enough for it, but just in case any of it gets revealed. There we go. And I'm connecting the top just to make coloring easier. There we go. And I don't really think you're going to see much of that. Now, I do want this to connect seamlessly. How could we do that? Because I can't obviously color it like this. There's actually a really easy fix to this. When I have auto gap fill happening, and because of the auto gap fill, we've got this. I'm just going to delete that and connect these two. Let's turn on snap to contour, and that should connect it better. There we go. Does this one have a problem? No, it looks like it's connected, but I'm just going to make sure it is. Okay. So if I wanted to connect this is also an issue with the eyes too. That would definitely come up. We're going to want to do, if we want to be able to color it, is we can do close gap or stroke. So close gap is if you have a bunch of gaps in your drawing and you just want to go boom, 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 connect instead of going snap to contour and trying to drag each one. The stroke is meant to be for something like this, where this, yeah, it's a gap, but it's not the same kind of gap. It's not like a tiny gap. It's a big opening. We can control it. There we go. You just want to make sure that you connect through the other points. So now if I go in and do a fill, it fills in. Good. In fact, let me fill it in with a color. I'll just fill it with iris color. And then I hit K. It just ends. There's no stroke. Okay. I may want to erase some of this too. That might be more than needed. Okay. I'm going to need to adjust the, yeah. Let's just move this up and connect. There we go. Now this part's a little lumpy. That's probably not going to matter too much, I don't think. Because we're not really probably going to see the edge of this at any point. I don't think his head's going to pull back that far. If it does, we can adjust it. So there's his neck. And then, oops, we'll make the chest. Add and close. Now if I hit add, I can start adding all the body parts as layers. That's fine. I'm just not doing that. So if I do want the arms to be able to move separately, then I don't want to draw the edges like that, because then when if the arms were to move apart, like if you were to slump his shoulders, he would have a big cut. So we would want to account for that. How thick is this? Let's try. Okay. Let's do 25. Basically, if I'm doing this with a pencil, I want to make sure it looks as smooth and nice as... oh, and actually the neck is too thin compared to the head, and that's because even though the thickness was set to be the same, I was using the line tool for the head and the pencil for the neck, and that has pressure sensitivity. But I could change that retroactively. Let's try 12. Look close. I think so. Okay. So for this, I would do something like that. And like that. And I don't think he's going to raise up and down too much. I would maybe extend a bit below, just in case, but not by a lot. Oops. And I am trying to make it overlap a little bit so that they're definitely connected. And you have these little, I call them little tails. You can just use the cutter to select them and get rid of them. Cutter takes wherever they overlap. Oh, whoops, not that one. Let's hit K and make sure this looks okay. Oh, there we go. Okay, it's connected. And then we have, oh, did I draw it? I drew that on the neck layer. Oh, whoopsie. That's fine. That's not a huge deal. Not in this software. In Flash, I'd be crying, or in Photoshop, because then, well, not crying that bad, not that dramatically. But these are separate strokes. And Harmony does allow you to grab them as separate strokes. So, easy fix. I'm just going to go and make a careful selection. I don't have to select everything. I just have to kind of make an okay selection. And I did grab that line, and I want to not grab that. There we go. I just held down Shift and tapped it to deselect it. Cut. Paste. There we go. So now they're on their own layer. Then, so arm, I usually will name them either arm right and arm left, or arm front, arm back. If the character is going to be flipping position, then arm front, arm back might be better. Especially if, let's say, you're doing a puppet that you're going to be using over and over again, and you might be flipping the position of the puppet, and the puppet's symmetrical. So you could just flip them without having to make a new set of arms for each side when the character is flipped. So let's say your character looks the same on both sides, which he does, then it's fine to flip. But if you had, let's say, a character who had a sleeveless on one side and a long sleeve on the other, or a big gauntlet on one hand and a normal hand on the other side, or a monster hand on one side, if they were different, then you would need to make separate parts for when the arm is closer to us and we're looking at the back of the arm, or when the arm's farther from us and we're looking at like more the inside of the arm. This one, well, he's staying the same angle. He's probably not going to use it. We're probably not going to use his puppet again outside of the shot. So it just depends on whichever one's easier. He's really, front and back might seem a little bit strange here because it's not, like this one is the one that's in front, but it's not super obvious. And this one does kind of overlap the body a little bit. So I would probably just call this one left and right. Now, if you're calling it left and right, which is more comfortable for you? Do you want to call it the character's left and right, or stage left and right, which would be your left and right? I like to think of it as the character's left and right, so it might feel dyslexic to see my naming scheme. But I'm going to call this one right and this one left, even though it's our right and our left, but it's his right and his left. So that's how I like to name them in an angle like this, but it's whichever one is more comfortable for you. My biggest recommendation is be consistent with it. If you're not consistent, then you can confuse yourself or confuse somebody that you're working with. So his right arm is in front of his chest. His left arm is essentially, also feels like it's in front of his chest a little bit, but it is under the cowl. So that's something I have to think about too. There's a way around that. We can take the chest X and, actually no. we can take the trunk, X, put it on a color layer, paste, connect it. So using these layers can be a way of building a puppet where you're going to have overlapping parts. So let's go into how to do that real quick. And that's actually what I'm thinking of doing with the head and the neck also. It's just, I'd have to see exactly what parts I might want to change, but this is one that's a little bit easier to point out. So if I do the shirt and I do the cowl on the layer, there we go, shirt and the cowl. And if I go to the right arm and lines, and I'm going to extend it down. Okay, so here we have the, he's wearing an undershirt, so he's got the undershirt and he has the shirt shoulders. And right now it's overlapping the cowl. I'm going to show you a little trick. Now this can be avoided if you just have characters that are built for puppeting where they're just not going to need to do this too much. But if you do have overlapping parts like this, and the cowl here, like I want the cowl and the shirt to move, and the chest to move together. They're not having any separation, because otherwise I could just have this be its own piece too, its own layer. But if they're meant to move together and you just don't want to think about them separately, if you have them separate on these layers, and it doesn't matter which, I just happen to have one, the cowl on the line and the chest on the color. It just matters which one's on top. So this one's on top. And it's just because I want this to overlap this. So that's just an easy way to make sure that happens. So if we go into our node view, so I'm going to take my node view and I'm going to put it over here. Oh, not like that. There we go. So node view. And I'm going to grab this to organize it. So that's just the order node view down. Right gets taken far away, and I don't want it far away. Let's move it closer. Okay. So you have the head, you have the neck, you have the arm left, arm right, chest, and the storyboard. And they're all connected to the composite. And then they're all connected to the display. The display is what makes it visible at all. And then you have your composite, which is everything combined. So what we can actually do is take these and separate them in here so that we can have one cover the other. So something about too is the node view layer order. Head, neck, arm left, arm right, chest, storyboards. See how they're in order from left to right? I could go into my node view. Oh, not node view. Actually, it was down here. Let's close it. I don't need that here. Let's do, I want node library. Node library. There we go. And you can actually take these, this is the line arts layer, this is the color arts, this is overlay arts, this is underlay arts. So I have line arts and color arts. So let's say I want the line arts layer of the chest to be in front of the arm right layer. So color arts. Oh, there it is, color art. So there's the color art. I could drag this node in here. And oh, I'm wrong. I want the line arts, not the color arts. Line arts. There we go. I want the line arts layer of the chest, which is this. Color arts, line arts, turn on K. So you can just see which one's selected. So line arts is the chest. Or I'm sorry, the cowl. And if I have the line arts of the chest layer in front of arm right, then when I turn this off, you can see that the arm is under the cowl, above the shirt. Again, I'm going to use that technique for the head and the neck too. I just want to see what it looks like when it's moving so I see exactly how I want to cut it up. This one's a little more obvious. I'd want to do it. Option 2 is I could have had the chest in front of the right arm and then have the color arts attached and put that behind. I could have done that too. It just felt like this was the better way to go. So I'm going to move these a little further apart. So if you are going to be doing puppeting, you'll be more likely working with the nodes in here, which can understandably be a little bit scary, but they're really wonderful. If you get comfortable with them, there's so much you can do and it can make your life so much easier. Okay, so now for the arm, so that's arm right. Arm left. Okay. So the arm right is, I know the arm right layer order looks a little strange now because now it looks like it's behind chest even though it's in front. It's like both in front and behind, which is why it looks like that in the layer order. So once you start doing stuff like this, the layer order might not match the way you would think it does. So here's the arm left, and let's move that. Yeah, I do want some of it to overlap, so I guess we'll leave it in front. Turn on onion skin, grab the pencil. Oops, let's not color that. Let's do it with the lines. And I wanted to go past. There's a weird little blip in there. How does that look? Okay. I mean, probably won't see it, but just in case we do, we don't want it to look too hideous. Let's turn off. Okay. And then the shoulder. Do I have auto gap fill? Yeah, I do. Okay. And I'm hitting Command Z until I get the line that I like. There we go. And then shirt shoulders. Shirt. Okay. Now I'm assuming the arm's not going to lift that high. If it does, then I may need to adjust this. So we have this overlapping the cowl, so I'm going to want... Actually, I could just make this push ahead of both. There we go. I can go into the skin in here, neck, and cowl. There we go. And then I can go into Cain's head. Turn this back on. And let's do eyes. So we can do the eyes separately or eyes together. Again, if this was a puppet that was going to be used over and over and over again, I would say let's do the eyes separately. We are just using them for this part. And I'm kind of intending that it's going to be a little bit less puppeted and a little bit more frame by frame with the eyes. Just depends. If you're going to be puppeting the eyes, so you're making tons of eyes and you just want to be able to swap between them, separate them. If you're frame by framing them, yeah, again, you may want to separate them or you may want to keep them together. I will probably keep them together because I'm going to frame by frame the eyes. This is a short shot. I think I have his eye too far away. This eye is too close to the ear, too far from the other eye. So I'm going to draw it where it is, and then I'm going to move it over. Now I'm not going to do the pupils. I'm going to do the pupils on their own layer. I'm also not going to do the eyebrows. I'll do those on their own layer too. Okay. So this is the only eye, because the story, whoops. Okay, it does look wonky because of all the connecting. That's not a big deal because I'm not actually going to color the eyelids or anything. I'm just going to color the eyeball, and I think that's the only... Yeah, the eyeball's fine. But if I was coloring in here, I'd have a gap. I could always select it and get rid of it. But that can be annoying too. But it's not not a big deal because I wasn't going to color that area. But that's a way you can get rid of it. Okay. He is tired. See how it looks. Since I moved his eye, how does it look? Yeah. He looks pretty wiped. Okay. Brows. Okay. If I were to do the eyes separately, I would just say IR or IL. Grab the other eye. X. IL. It would probably make more sense if IL was behind, but it doesn't overlap, so it doesn't really matter. Unless if you want to do them separately. Maybe we'll just do them separately, even if it's frame by frame. Brows. So we could do the brows separately or together. It'd be the same idea. Brow, R. Actually, that would be this eyebrow. Now, because I moved the eyebrow is no longer in the right place. I could either draw it and then move it over, or I could draw it in the correct place, kind of watching the old eyebrow. Depends on how much I was in love with that eyebrow. Brow, L. You can call it eyebrow. I just like to call it brow because if I'm looking at a bunch of names and I see like eyeball, eye pupil, eyebrow, it might get a little bit confusing. So I usually just call them the shortest version that I can. There we go. And then I have the mouth. His mouth is open, but he doesn't start talking yet. So that's probably going to be one of the mouth shapes. He says, am I that obvious? No, sorry. Am I? Yeah, that's probably a good mouth angle for some of it. Let me see. Let's do mouth. And close. So there's a closed mouth. And I'm just going to make this shape because I know he's going to eventually make it. I'm going to turn off auto gap. I may need to fix some things, but I don't want weird holes in his mouth. There we go. Might need to shrink it a little bit. Let's try 10. There we go. And those two fiery colored dots means that these are not connected. So since I just noticed that they're there, I'm going to fix it right now. Otherwise, when I go to color, I'm going to be like, oh, yeah, that's right, there's an issue. There we go. And there's red here. Is there an overlap? There is an overlap. That looks fine. Okay. Okay, well, I'm not going to worry about the lip syncing yet. Head. Skin. And I don't really have a shadow skin color for here. I'll just color this same. Hair. And then let's do IR. I want stroke. IL. Call it the eye whites and teeth color. His brows are his hair color. And then I gotta add his pupils. So eye, drawing. So I'm gonna do a pupil R. Well, I'll start with pupil L since they're gonna stack up. Add, pupil R. R. Add and close. So the right pupil. And I'm not cutting off the pupil. I'm letting it go past the eye. Because I'm going to use this to make the pupil only show up inside the eye. That will allow me to move the pupils around without having to redraw them over and over again. Other than redrawing them over and over again that I'm currently doing. Oh. Let's see. Okay. Does he look like he is focused? Yeah, I think so. He looks tired, but he looks focused, which is the point. We do have a little tail coming out here, and it's not connected. Can I just delete it? No. Let's take the cutter. We got a little opening in here. That's an There we go. Let's take the pencil editor. Oh boy. Let's maybe take out one of these extra points. Why did it turn out like that? Let's get rid of it. Another option too is I could just use the ellipse. And if I want to have it kind of bend, I can hold down Option. There we go. What's the 10? This one looks thinner. Does that look the same width? Yes, okay. Okay. And just color the eyes. Perfect, right? That's exactly how the eyes are supposed to be overlapping. Oh yeah, and he's got bangs too. So let's go into how to use the cutter to separate. Let's see, where are they at? The pupils are above the eye. Actually, let's reorder. Let's take the right node and bring it back. And chest in line. Okay, so we have the pupil. And we want the pupils to show up above the eye so that we see them in front. But we want them to stay within the eye so that if they go past the eye, they are no longer visible. There is a node for that called cutter. So I'm going to do is grab cutter. So what I want to do is put a cutter in for, let's say, pupil L. And we can connect by either taking the plug and popping it in. It will make it disappear temporarily because it's no longer connected to the composite. Or you can hold down Option as you drag it under, and it will connect through the top and through the bottom. So you won't see a change. It just makes it a few less steps. And again, doing that is by holding Option. But even though I have it through a cutter, it's like, okay, well, it's going through a cutter, but what is it cutting? This here is the mat. This is what would say, okay, I want this pupil to go through a cutter, so I want to only be visible in a certain spot. Cutter's like a mask in Adobe. And this is what it's being cut into or out of. Like, this is just going to control where you can see it. But I have nothing going through it right now. It's the pupil L. I want it to go through the pupil L. I'm sorry, the IL. I want it to stay inside of the white of the eye. Now, I'm going to show you a way. I'm going to do it, but there's going to be a problem, and I'll show you what it is, and I'll show you how to fix it. So I'm going to go into IL, and bop. Well, that's the opposite of what I wanted. I could see a little bit of the pupil outside of the eye, but that's the opposite of what I wanted. Easy fix. We just click on the little yellow box, which just goes into the properties, and I'm just going to invert it. But, you see the problem? It's overlapping the eyelash. Uh-oh. So depending on your style, that might be fine. But if that's not what you want it to do, let's unplug it. So, why did that happen? It's using the whole eye. We only want the white of the eye to be noted. So, what we could do is we can go into the IL. I can take the color, and you can take the color like literally just by selecting it. X, go to the color arts layer, paste. And I'm going to do that with the IR layer as well. I'm going to go into the layer arts, select it, cut, go to color, paste. So they're still behind the lines, because if I done like overlay arts, you would see it, in front. See what I mean? So I could have done it to underlay arts too. It's just line arts and color arts are usually what we're going to use, but you could use all four. Now, I'm going to take the IL, and I'm going to grab the color arts layer. There it is. And IL to color arts, that just means that I'm isolating the color arts channel for this, or the color arts layer for this, and I'm going to push it into, boom, the cutter. So now, it only shows, I didn't have to hit invert again because I didn't undo. I hit it and I just unplugged it. I didn't undo anything. So now, I'm going to do the same for the IR. So let me just move line IL here, color arts here, pupil here, cutter here. Just so I can see it. So I can see the chain. Then we have IR, pupil. I want the pupil to go through a cutter. So, and I'm going to hold down Option so it just, oops, that's not what I wanted. Undo. There we go. I don't want to go through the mat. This is the mat. I want to go through the top. So this is the drawing that's going through the cutter effect and through. I need the IR, and I want the color arts layer there it is, color art layer. I want to isolate the color art layer of IR and pop it into the mat. Oops, it's doing exactly the opposite of what I want. So I got to click inside the yellow box and hit invert. There we go. And now it cuts off. Wait. It's So something that it's doing is it's going through up to the stroke. Not stroke, I'm sorry. Up to the line. Up to the path. It is overlapping some of the stroke. Let's see if there's a setting that we can change for that. Another option is color arts. Is we could take, well, one easy fix is we can take the line art layer, isolate that, and then have it show up in front of pupil. And that would fix it. We could do that again. Line art. And then to have this come up in front of that pupil, and that should, where's this pupil plugging into? There we go. So that would fix it. This is a little tangled right now, so let's separate these so that it's not as rough looking. Neck, head. Okay. Eye, color arts, line arts, cutter, pupil. I was trying to separate it so I could see the connections a little more easily. Line art. Because it's easy to later come in here and go, or you're like you're trying to do it in another file, and you're like, what did I even do? So this part looks a little wild, a little tangled. So hopefully that makes sense. So we are separating the line art and the color art. We can even change the names of these if it helps. You could change the name by clicking on the little yellow square, and I could say IL color art. Okay. IL line art. Pupil L cutter. If that makes it easier to tell, like, oh, okay, that's what this was for. And IR color art. Okay. IR line art. Did I spell it like that in the other? No, I combined them. Well, this one I did. It doesn't matter how you do it as long as it's consistent. Pupil, let's see. Pupil R cutter. There we go. Let's move this one up higher. High. Here. Here. Head. Neck, because we're going to do something like that with the neck. Chest. line art, pupil, pupil cutter. And then you have these. They're just hanging out being eyebrows. Okay. Put this over here and this over here. There we go. Usually if you kind of set it up like a little tree or like a little onion or like a little clove of garlic, it will might be best. There we go. And I did not draw his bangs yet, so let's do that. So his bangs are going to be higher than his head. Well, technically they'd be higher than his mouth too. So I'll just do that and say bangs. There we go. Now, if I did plan on animating these bangs, I may want to put them in chunks. Because if I have all of this as one layer, that might, if I were to move them all at once, especially if I just rotate them and I don't frame by frame it, it might make him look like he's got a toupee. Because this is moving in the same way this is moving. It might look a little weird. I don't think his bangs are really going to move that much. If they do, they'd probably move in this chunk. Maybe this chunk and this chunk. I'll start it as one big piece because I don't really anticipate moving it very much. Whoops. And I can separate it if I choose to. Oops. Okay. And I'm going to hit the K button. Okay, so I can see the lines. So I see a couple of spots where they are close but not actually connecting. I could manually move each one. I can also do a close gap, close gap, close gap. I can't tell if that one's connected or not. It doesn't look like it. That one's not a big deal. That's not actually closed. Okay, should be good. And we can grab the stroke. And I want to make sure it overlaps this. I don't want any bald spots. And then hair. Okay. There we go. Might have his eyes too close together now that I'm thinking about it. So I could do is move eye, R, pupil, brow. Make sure this is off. Move it over just a little bit. Not as much as it was before. That was too far away. There we go. Okay. Dude looks half asleep. Let's make sure to save our file. Saving saves lives. You can do that with Control S or Command S or File Save. Okay, I'm going to hit K. Okay. Okay. Let's make this go away. And let's... okay, if I were to move the head and I were to take this, and that's about where we'd want to move the head. But if I were to move it, yeah, that's a problem. And if I moved it farther, we're going to have that gap. Okay, so I figured out what to do about this. Let's get rid of that line. Let's turn on this. Let's connect this Oops, not with that color. Connect this. Let's take the hair, move it. I don't know if I like the way that looks. There we go. Let's try that. And hair. There we go. So what I wanted to do is when the head is bending forward, I want this part to reveal behind the neck. I want actually this whole part to be behind the neck, but in front of the cowl. So let's take the neck. Let's make a selection of the head and, yeah, that part. And actually, no, let's grab the cowl, because the cowl's behind. X, paste. And then I want to take the head, and I want to use the, okay. Let's use the cutter. To make a, okay. I'm on the head, right? Yeah. Cut. Oh, no, that's hideous. Let me do this before. Gradient texture. Okay. I could probably just do this with the color. Color of the hair. X. To the color arts layer. But I also need to do it with some of the lines. X. No. Cut. Paste. Okay, so these are still separate pieces, so let's cut, paste. Okay, so let's see if that works. So I have the bangs. The bangs aren't doing anything special, so. Oh, and if you're getting like a tangle of lines like right here, we can't really do much about this, but I can use that little dot. It's called a waypoint, and I can use it to keep them from overlapping and control them a little bit. There we go. So over here, I want the head to have the color arts layer. Or just do line art and color arts. Color arts. So I want the head color arts to be behind the next line arts. Neck. Oh, did I make a mistake with the cow? Did I lose the cow? Undo, 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 undo. There it goes. Okay, I must have deleted that somehow. Okay, let's go back to the head. Line arts. Cut. Put that into the color arts. And go into the line arts and take these lines. I'm able to grab them separately because they were drawn in parts, drawn in pieces. Maybe even grab that one. And paste into the color arts. So now, if I hit the K, you can see what's selected. So in the color arts, I can see that the color and some of the lines are selected. In the line arts, I can see other lines are available. So combined, it has the whole head, but the color arts has the hair color and these lines here at the bottom. Like this part. So the head, I want the color arts to be behind the next line arts. The next line arts is this, right? Oh, and I need to move this over. Cut. Paste. Let's grab line arts. So I want the where are you? Okay. Okay, let's see how that looks. Does that look right? No, that's not the right order. Head, color arts. Behind the necks, line arts. Head. The heads, color arts. Behind the necks, line art. But it is not showing. Okay. What if I move this more? That's an issue. Okay. Head, color art, neck, line art. Okay. Neck. It's on the line art. Okay, whoops. Well, that's not really going to matter, but line art. Color. Okay, let's try head, line art. Pull that out. There we go. That's the problem. We need to pull out the... So I needed to have a separate line art and color art because I had it going through, basic color art going through twice. And see how that looks. Okay. And I need the next color art. There we go. Now, if his head moves. His bangs aren't following, or facial features aren't following. That's not anything to worry about yet. Alright. I don't like the way the back of his head looks, though, when he's bending that way. Let's turn that on. Push. That's all. Okay. this up. Actually, let's get rid of this. I want to change it. So let's lines. Tool properties. Oh, it does have auto gap fill. Okay. K. Oh, that's right. It's not connecting because it's not associating this line because it's on a different layer. That's fine. I'll just take the line. There we go. Hair. Fill. There we go. Now if I take his head and I rotate it, I don't like how that looks. That's okay. Go into color, contour. Let's make this smoother. This may feel like it's taking a really long time, but if this was frame by framed, ink and paint would take a lot longer. This is still all being done in one sit down. Okay. Okay. Better. Much better. Again, don't worry about the eyes and the hair and stuff not connecting. We haven't told it to connect yet. Okay. So now, let's start connecting parts. Now, even though I'm grabbing these parts and moving them, moving the drawings myself, I'm only doing that to test them. I would not animate that way. Because what if we wanted to change out the head? What if we wanted to make any big changes, switch out drawings, or anything? I just very strongly recommend not animating the drawings themselves. Instead, we're going to want to put them on pegs, anything that's going to move. So I'm going to go through and put a peg on everything. So I'm going to go into the node view. You can also do it in here, plus parent peg. I think the node view is just easier to do this with. So let's do the head. It doesn't really matter what order you do them in. You can go from top layer to bottom layer. But if you select the head layer node, Command P, head P. So P stands for peg. And it's green. That's important to know because a green node means that it is a movement or like a translate node. It's a node about moving something around. It's not a drawing. Never drawing. The blue nodes are usually more of like drawing nodes. And then these are related to drawing nodes. So they're also blue, but they're not the same level of blue. So I have green. And I'm going to want the eye. I'm going to put that on a peg. Now this is not really going to move. The eyeball is not going to move unless I was doing like 2.5D. But still, it's easier if I ever switch out this eye with something else. The pupil is going to move, though. But I want the eye to be the parent of the pupil, just so when the head moves, the pupils can move with it. Now, another option that you may want to do is have the pupil not have a master. And that way, if I take the head and I decide to move it, I can keep the eyes focused. You may or may not like that, because you see how his eyes are rolling back right now? So you may or may not want to do that. I will probably, at least for now, have the pupil be parented to the IL. IR, pupil. I want the pupil to follow the R. And I want the eye to follow the head. I'm going to move the head over. Move it up. Plug it in. So you can have multiple children to the peg. Alright, so I am going to want the mouth and the brows. They're going to have their own pegs too. Now the brows might move. The mouth might too. I don't think I would move it very much, but they might move. Let's move these up. Okay. Plug. Plug. So if it's coming out from the bottom plug, that means it is following this. This is the boss. Let's see. Let's move this up a little higher. So those little dots are called wayfinders. Or waypoints, I'm sorry, waypoints. And the point of them is just to help keep your object organized. It's a lot easier if you could see each path. Again, sometimes you can't really help it, so you're going to get entanglement like that. And sometimes that just can't be helped. Okay, so now you have the neck. You have the chest. Now, usually your neck is going to follow the chest. The arms are going to follow the chest. Boom. Boom. The chest is going to probably be the boss of the head. Boom. Yeah, so this part's going to look a little tangled. It's hard to avoid. And if you ever make a waypoint and you didn't mean to, or you made one and it's no longer helpful, you can always just select it and delete it. I'm going to undo that, though. But you can. Do I want to bring the body up higher? Or the chest? No. Here. Here. Oops. Here. 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 And there's no parent for the storyboards. Okay. So that is setting up a really base puppet. And right now the file only goes 1 frame. We can extend the exposure. So FNF5. Actually, we can do that for all of them. And that expands them all. I didn't color the mouth yet. So that is just setting up a basic puppet based on your shot. So it's ready to animate, and that's what we're going to start doing next. But this is just getting it set up, and some ways that you can get around some issues where you need some things to be kind of in front and kind of in back. In animation, we call that sandwiching, or in 2D rigging. So it's just sandwiching some of the elements. And those could have been done without doing the color arts, line arts. They could have been done by making them separate layers, and that would have been fine. It's just doing it this way makes it a little bit easier because they're not really meant to be animated separately. They're just meant to be part of the same drawing. It's just we need some of it to show up in front and some of it to show up behind. So that should hopefully make life a little bit easier because we won't have as many, maybe as many nodes. But anyway, that is setting up a little puppet for a scene that's kind of just meant to be used once, just meant to be used in this, a simple shot. I like to use this kind of technique when I'm going to be combining it with frame-by-frame animation, just doing a couple shots that are a little bit cheaper. Again, this looked like this took a long time, but once you get used to it and you're comfortable with working with it, you can get shots inked and painted so much quicker because ink and painting frame-by-frame animation can actually really take a long time. So in the next lesson, we're going to be taking this puppet and we're going to be animating it with a little bit of frame-by-frame in the eyes and the brows and the mouth. But we'll see how much we can get away with just using the puppet parts.